These guys are going to fire away. Obviously, they've covered all of our stuff, 83 weeks. They know about the new show coming out, so it's open season. I will step out of your way. You guys let me know. We good? If you need to be in a little closer, feel free with microphones. Derek? Yep, let me go out.
How you doing?
How am I doing?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a firing squad. Like somebody give me a blindfold and a cigarette. This isn't going to end well. I just know it.
You've always been respectful of the media, right?
Yeah, I treat them with kids' gloves and a baseball bat.
I like baseball.
A hand grenade if I have one.
I like grenades too.
So you got a new show with John Alva. How'd that come together? How you feeling about it?
You know, I feel great about it. The show came together, kind of a result of the podcast. One of the things that makes my podcast, I think, a little different than everybody else's is that I talk a lot about the business of the wrestling business, not so much about stories, although I do a little bit of that as well. But the audience, my audience at least, really likes the business of the wrestling business. So we thought, well, why not just do a show just about that? So that's how it came about. I'm looking forward to doing it. We're going to give it a whirl and see how the audience reacts to it.
Do you have any specific topics in mind for the first few episodes?
No, I leave that up to the people that are interviewing me. They do their job, I do mine.
Is there anything certain that you're kind of looking forward to touching upon a little bit more, elaborating on how you can't do in 83 weeks?
Yeah, I want to go a little deeper. There's so much conversation online about ratings and demos, but there's very little context. You know what I mean about context?
I have no clue what you mean.
But, I think it's important for people that are such strong fans of whether it's AEW or WWE to have an appreciation for the business side of it as well as the artistic or the creative side of it. So I really want to do a much, much deeper dive into what ratings mean, the context of demos, what they really mean in the big picture, as opposed to just taglines and headlines on social media.
Eric, do you think there's anything in media right now with distribution, with streaming services, I've talked to you about this before, that wrestling could adapt to as it constantly changes with how people consume content?
Look, if you look at the history, and this is again another thing that I want to talk about, on the Strictly Business podcast on the ad-free shows, is wrestling has always been on the forefront of entertainment. When televisions first became a thing in the early 50s, mid-50s, professional wrestling was one of the most successful shows on network television at the very beginning of television time. You fast forward to the emergence of cable. When cable, became a real thing, professional wrestling was and still is one of the most successful things on cable television. Pay-per-view came along shortly after cable television as a result of cable. Wrestling, once again, one of the most popular forms of entertainment on pay-per-view. Now we're in the digital and streaming age. Well, guess what one of the most successful, online digital and streaming platforms in the world is? WWE. So sports entertainment, professional wrestling, whatever you want to call it, has always been on the forefront of streaming. And to answer your question, or on the forefront of technology and entertainment, I think wrestling will continue to remain on the cutting edge of whatever platforms emerge tomorrow or the day after.
Do you think that's because wrestling is something that, is basically a new show every week? Because it has to keep recreating itself every week? Is that a tribute to it being on the forefront of technology?
There's a few things that I think attribute to it. One, just to be really honest about it, again, strictly business. Sports entertainment, professional wrestling is relatively inexpensive to produce compared to other forms of traditional entertainment, whether it's action films, scripted entertainment, dramas, sitcoms, you name it. If you look at what professional wrestling delivers in terms of an audience versus what it costs compared to other forms of entertainment that draw equal to, maybe in some cases more, but in many cases less than professional wrestling. So that the financial aspects behind the product is one thing. The other thing is professional wrestling is, like all good forms of entertainment, it comes down to good and evil. It comes down to a good guy and a bad guy, and the drama that manifests as a result of that. That's just part of who we are as human beings. We've always been drawn to those good and evil stories, and wrestling provides that every week.
Eric, you have been really one of the only, basically the only real legit, I want to say threat to WWE or WCW in your days, right? What do you think other products, AEW or any other wrestling product, can come and really actually be real competition for WWE?
You know, if you talk about real competition, you have to define what that competition is. If you're talking about competition in terms of revenues, good luck with that. You know, WWE is such a head start. They're so far out in front of any new emerging company that it would take a generation to really catch up to the revenue footprint. If you talk about global distribution of the product, the footprint of the brand, that too is going to, it can happen, but it's going to take a lot of time. The truth is, you know, I got competitive with WWE when it was WWF, and although they were clearly way out in front of WCW at the time, they weren't so big that they were not vulnerable. And now they become so big that while they still may be vulnerable, it's going to take a hell of an effort to make them realize you're there.
Thank you.
How much would you say, from the creative aspect of how wrestling is handled today, in comparison to how people access media and the immediacy of everything, how much do you think, which way does it come into a difference in today's wrestling product?
If I understand your question right, I think the product has evolved, changed, and morphed to suit the culture. Our culture expects news. You know, they want to know what's going on all over the world within 2.5 or 3 minutes. They just want the headlines. They don't want the story, right? That's just what we've become. We get our information, you know, on an SMS. You know, most of our dialogue is digital, so we're processing information so much faster. And entertainment products, wrestling in particular, has to adapt to that. And it's adapting to that by telling stories faster. You know, you go back to the mid-'80s, even into the early '90s, WWE had 4 pay-per-views. WCW had 4 pay-per-views. You had an entire quarter. You had 3 months to build up your stories and your characters and experiment and build and create anticipation. Now you've got 3 weeks.
Right.
So week 1 is the beginning of the story. Act 1, Act 2 is week 2, Act 3 is week 3. Payoff is at the pay-per-view. That's a really short story. And short stories don't resonate the way longer, bigger stories do.
I just spoke to Jimmy Hart, who said that there's probably like a library of 100 songs he produced in WCW that actually Turner still owns as opposed to WWE. Do you think there's a market in the future for like music libraries for creators, or maybe it be the producers themselves to sort of license these to wrestling companies? Because we saw AEW just license the one that holds the Hardy Boys thing.
Look, there's always going to be a value in almost any form of content. Hey man, good to see you. It's like, I haven't seen him in a long time. I haven't seen a lot of you guys I don't know, but him I know, right? And him too, I regret to admit it. But there's always going to be value to content, whether it be music, video, NFTs, whatever it is, there'll be value. But I think a wrestling-related library, yeah, definitely. Except for Jimmy's music, it just blows. I don't know about Jimmy's. Sorry, Jimmy, I'm just kidding. Hey, baby, I love you. Thanks for giving me a shot at WCW Saturday night, baby, I love you.
So I have a question. So right now in the era that we live right now with wrestling, there's a lot of talk about sports entertainment and pro wrestling. So how would you be able to define that? What's the balance that you think that wrestling should have right now?
I'll tell you what my balance is. If I'm doing an interview for WWE on any one of their networks or something that's associated with them, it's sports entertainment, out of respect. But in my normal course of conversation, it's professional wrestling, because that's what I grew up with. I've never felt the need to try to change the name of it for any reason. So personal conversations on 83 Weeks, my podcast, it's always professional wrestling, unless I'm talking about WWE, and then I'm respected sports entertainment.
In the last couple of years, you've kind of done TV or media for both, for WWE and AEW. Do you have a favorite appearance over the last couple of years?
Nah. You know, it's always fun, don't get me wrong. I'm always grateful for the opportunity to get out in front of a red light, even this one, although this one feels more like a firing squad than television. But there is a red light. I see one over there. But look, when I show up, it's a cameo. I'm not involved in the storyline. It's really just a little bit of garnish on the plate, which I'm very grateful for. But it's hard to compare that to, being the minister in the Chuck and Billy wedding. I mean, that was kind of fun, right? How do you compare with that?
So do you see yourself doing anything anytime soon with either WWE or AEW where you will be full time?
No. No. Number one, look, I'm a realist. As much as I enjoy performing and getting out there in front of the camera, and I'm always grateful to put my toe in the water and make an appearance, that ship has sailed, brother. That's in my rearview mirror. I'm grateful for it, and I'm happy to get up every morning and look at my rearview mirror and think about the things that I've been able to do. But I'm fortunate to not feel so connected to it that I have to have that back in my life. I'm really happy doing what I'm doing.
How about backstage writing backstage?
No, because actually, that sounds fun, and it is fun because the creative process is a blast when it's a healthy one. But that's two full-time jobs because you're not only working while you're working, but you're thinking while you're not working, and you're imagining, and it's hard to turn that switch off if you're really good at it and you're really passionate about it. So it's not like you go to work at 9 o'clock in the morning and come home at 6 o'clock at night. Forget about it. I've done my best work at 3 o'clock in the morning in my sleep, and I wake up with an idea. And as cool as that sounds, it's fatiguing as hell. So I'm good right where I'm at, brother.
Eric, I wanted to ask you one last question about, the gentleman there talked about, you being AEW and WWE. It felt like initially there was a more rosy relationship with you and Tony Khan and AEW with the appearances, and you've been a little bit more critical potentially recently. What would you attribute that to? Is it more kind of, giving them a fair shake at the start and kind of being more critical of them now? Where did it kind of change for you?
It didn't change at all for me. What changed in the discourse between Tony Khan and I was that Tony felt whatever he felt it necessary to come out and say that, Dynamite is where WCW was in 1996. Well, come on. Is there anybody here that buys that? WCW was beating the WWE at that time. WCW was an extremely profitable company at that time. WCW was promoting massive pay-per-views at that time. Many of them, not just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 a year. You can't compare WCW to AEW, but he felt like, he's got to try to get himself over, so he threw that out there, which was fine. That part didn't really bother me. What really bothered me was when Tony Khan said, well, if Ted Turner knew as much about booking as I do, WCW would have never failed. That pissed me the fuck off. That was so disrespectful. And I gave an honest response to an honest question. And that honest response kind of, created an opportunity for Tony to feel his need to respond, which I understand. I don't hold him against it, don't hold him against it for that. But that's where it kind of escalated. But it doesn't have anything to do with my feelings about AEW. I'm a fan of AEW. I'm excited about AEW. I want them to succeed. I see a lot of great things. I said that long before our little dust up. Conrad would talk about Dynamite on 83 Weeks podcast, and I would point out the things I enjoy about AEW more than the WWF. But at the same time, if I'm asked a question, I'm going to be honest in my critique of that. But it's not meant to be a shot. It just gets interpreted as that. And I think Tony's a little thin-skinned, and he took it a little hard.
All right, guys, thank
Tony,
you.
win!
Thank you, Eric. Well, we're going to bring on Conrad
No,
now.
I'm having fun now. I go now.
We going up like 1,000. I'ma flex just like a muscle man Malcolm. We going up like 1,000. I'ma flex just like a muscle man Malcolm. When it just like 1, 2, 3. If you like the channel, this will squeeze. If you like the channel, this will squeeze. If you like the channel, this will squeeze.